We begin with breaking news from Washington, where Donald Trump has delivered a major salvo in his trade war, this time aimed squarely at Canada.
We should now be hit, all goods coming from Canada, with an additional 35% tariff. And this is one of the many that Donald Trump, according to these letters he's sending around to different countries.
But I just signed the largest trade deal in history, I think maybe the largest deal in history, with Japan. And that was done with Japan. They had their top people here, and we worked on it long and hard, and it's a great deal for everybody. I always say it has to be great for everybody. It's a great deal. A lot different from the deals in the past, I can tell you that. But we're doing really well as a country. We're strong.
Look better now than you did before this horrible thing happened.
And I said to the Japanese trade representatives, and these were the top people, we concluded the one deal, Doug, and now we're going to conclude another one because they're forming a joint venture with us in Alaska, as you know, for the LNG. So I said,
Canada just delivered a shockwave to the global energy order, and Washington didn't see it coming. For decades, Canadian natural gas flowed south into the United States, giving America a steady supply and keeping Canada locked into a one-sided trade. But on June 30th, 2025, that era ended with a single shipment. A massive liquefied natural gas tanker slipped out of Kitimat, British Columbia. Its destination, not Texas, not Louisiana, but Asia. And when news of that reached Washington, Donald Trump exploded in rage. For over 30 years, Canada's natural gas had only one real customer: the United States. Every single day, pipelines carried billions of cubic feet across the border. In 2024 alone, the number was staggering: 8.8 billion cubic feet per day, valued at around $8 billion US. But this reliance came at a price. Canada had no real control over its exports. Every time tariffs shifted, every time Washington played politics, Canadian producers paid the cost. And Trump? He wasn't subtle. He pushed for tariffs as high as 35% on Canadian imports, including a 10% hit on energy products. For Canada's energy industry, this was like being trapped in a tightening vice. Dependence on one market meant dependence on one set of rules. And those rules were being rewritten with every stroke of a pen in Washington. But then came the breaking point, and Canada made its move.
June 30th, 2025 will go down as one of the most important days in Canadian energy history. That was the day the LNG Canada terminal officially launched its first overseas shipment. Built at a jaw-dropping cost of 40 billion Canadian dollars, this project was more than just steel and concrete. It was freedom. The facility at Kitimat compresses natural gas to minus 165 degrees Celsius, shrinking its volume 600-fold so it can be shipped anywhere in the world. No pipelines, no American oversight, no political chokehold. And the destination? Asia. The tanker Gaslog Glasgow carried 2.66 million tons of Canadian LNG straight across the Pacific. What once would have required 20 days through the Panama Canal could now be done in 10. A faster, cheaper, and more independent route. This wasn't just a shipment. It was Canada sending a message to the world. We don't need America to sell our gas anymore. And Asia was more than ready to listen. Japan, South Korea, and China are among the hungriest energy markets on Earth. Each is desperate for cleaner, more reliable energy sources. And unlike oil, which often comes from unstable regions, LNG from Canada looked safe, stable, and trustworthy. Japan is planning to boost LNG imports by at least 20 million tons annually, starting in 2026. South Korea is already expanding its storage capacity by 50%. And China? It had locked in long-term contracts before Canada even loaded its first shipment. Why the rush? Because these countries see Canadian LNG as more than fuel. It's a geopolitical hedge. It reduces reliance on Russian gas, shields them from Middle Eastern instability, and gives them a supplier aligned with their climate goals. For Canada, this was a dream scenario. Demand was soaring, timing was perfect, and suddenly, a decades-long dependence on America was replaced with brand-new partnerships stretched. But back in Canada, the story wasn't just about geopolitics. It was also about people. During construction, LNG Canada created more than 50,000 jobs. Local businesses secured nearly $6 billion in contracts. And in a groundbreaking shift, the Haisla Nation became an equity partner in the project's pipeline, ensuring Indigenous voices weren't just heard, but directly invested. This was historic. For decades, Indigenous communities were sidelined or steamrolled in resource projects. Now, they were co-owners, shaping decisions and sharing profits. But not everyone was celebrating. The project sparked fierce debates over whether tax incentives gave away too much to corporations. Environmental critics argued that Canada's regulations were strong, but not strong enough. And costs? They were steep. Building in remote, harsh terrain pushed expenses far higher than similar projects on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Yet, despite the hurdles, the project was finished, and the payoff was about to be enormous. If Canada was celebrating, Washington was fuming. Trump raged that Canada was selling out America by bypassing U.S. pipelines. The U.S. had imposed tariffs thinking it could keep Canada dependent, but instead, it drove Canada to cut the cord entirely. Billions of dollars that once flowed to American buyers were now heading overseas. Asian companies were securing contracts that Washington thought it controlled. The U.S. media painted it as a betrayal. Energy lobbyists screamed about lost leverage. And Trump? He went on the offensive, threatening even harsher tariffs, warning allies not to buy from Canada, and blasting Ottawa as ungrateful. But the truth was simple. Canada didn't need America anymore. That first shipment was just the beginning. Canada wasn't stopping at 14 million tons per year. The plan was to double production to 28 million tons, putting Canada among the world's top 5 LNG exporters. Asian buyers weren't just customers, they were investors. Companies from Japan, China, South Korea, and Malaysia were all part of the joint venture. That meant financial risk was spread out, and political interest was baked in. If Phase 2 succeeded, Canada wouldn't just be an exporter. It would be a powerhouse, rivaling Qatar, the US, and Australia in the LNG race. And Washington knew it. Still, the road wasn't smooth. Construction costs in Canada were some of the highest in the world. Strict environmental regulations meant constant monitoring, expensive upgrades, and a narrow margin for error. Public expectations around climate accountability were sky high. And the competition was brutal. Qatar's massive North Field expansion is set to flood markets with cheap LNG. The U.S. Gulf Coast has terminals springing up left and right. Even Australia is doubling down on its role in Southeast Asia. Canada had to offer more than just location. It had to offer credibility, stability, transparency, ESG leadership, and Indigenous partnerships. That model, the partnership with the Haisla Nation, was already drawing international attention. Energy buyers wanted suppliers who could prove they were sustainable and socially responsible.
With every tanker that left Kitimat, Canada's position shifted. No longer tethered to U.S. pipelines, no longer a junior partner in a one-sided deal. Canada was now a strategic supplier, with its own voice on the global stage. Japan saw it as a shield against energy insecurity. South Korea saw it as insurance against Russian gas. China saw it as a stabilizer in an unstable world. For the first time in modern history, Canada wasn't just exporting resources, it was shaping geopolitics. But big questions remain. Can Canada compete with giants like Qatar and the US?
Can it maintain public trust at home while expanding abroad? Can it keep costs low enough to stay competitive in a cutthroat market? The answers will define Canada's role for decades to come. That first LNG shipment wasn't just cargo. It was a statement, a declaration of independence from Washington, a promise of partnership with Asia, and a challenge to some of the biggest players in global energy. Trump's rage made headlines, but the real story isn't in his anger. It's in Canada's ambition. An ambition to be more than America's gas station, to step onto the world stage as a trusted supplier, a geopolitical player, and maybe even a model for how energy can be developed responsibly in the 21st century. So now the question isn't whether Canada can survive without the US. The question is whether the US can survive without Canada. And one thing is certain: this energy war has only just begun.